Welcome to War Bios, the podcast where we delve into the most pivotal battles in history, and I'm your host, General Biography. Today, we're going to explore one of the most fascinating and complex conflicts of the ancient world, the Battle of Kadesh, fought in 1274 BC. This epic clash between the Egyptian and Hittite empires was a turning point in the history of the Near East, showcasing the military prowess, strategic genius, and diplomatic cunning of two of the ancient world's greatest powers. Muwatalli's ambitious expansionist policies and military campaigns had brought the Hittites into direct conflict with the Egyptians, who were then ruled by Ramses II, one of the most celebrated pharaohs in Egyptian history. The Egyptians, having already established a strong presence in Syria and Palestine, were determined to maintain their control over these vital regions and protect their trade routes. The tension between the two empires had been simmering for years, with both sides engaging in a series of skirmishes and proxy wars. The Hittites, masters of the lightning-fast chariot attack and skilled in the art of siege warfare, had been making significant gains in the region, capturing key cities and fortresses that threatened Egyptian control. The Egyptians, renowned for their disciplined infantry and powerful chariot corps, were determined to put an end to these encroachments and reassert their dominance over the Near East. In the years leading up to the battle, both empires had been busy mobilizing their armies and preparing for war. The Egyptians, driven by a mix of strategic necessity and imperial pride, had been gathering intelligence on the Hittite forces, studying their tactics and weaknesses. Meanwhile, the Hittites, fueled by their own ambitions and sense of destiny, had been fortifying their strongholds and assembling a vast coalition of allied troops from across Anatolia and Syria. As the Egyptian army marched northwards into Syrian territory, they were met with a series of Hittite-controlled cities and fortresses, each one posing a significant challenge to their advance. The Egyptians, however, were undaunted, driven by their determination to reclaim Kadesh and assert their dominance over the region. In the spring of 1274 BC, Ramses II led his army out of Egyptian territory, embarking on a perilous journey through the scorching deserts and rugged mountain ranges of Syria. The Egyptian army, comprising some 20,000 troops, was divided into 4 divisions, each named after a major Egyptian god: Amun, Re, Ta, and Seth. These divisions were further subdivided into smaller units, including infantry, archers, and charioteers, all of whom were seasoned veterans of previous campaigns. As they marched towards Kadesh, the Egyptians encountered numerous Hittite scouts and patrols, who reported back to Muwatalli II on the Egyptian army's movements and dispositions. The Hittites, aware of the Egyptian army's approach, had been busy preparing a trap for their enemy. Muwatalli II, a cunning and experienced commander, had assembled a vast army of his own, estimated to be around 30,000 troops strong. This force included not only Hittite regulars, but also contingents from various allied states, including the Mitanni, the Kaskians, and the Arzawans. As the Egyptians drew closer to Kadesh, they were met with a series of cleverly designed ambushes and skirmishes, all aimed at weakening their resolve and disrupting their formations. The Hittites, masters of the hit-and-run tactic, used their lightning-fast chariots to devastating effect, striking at the Egyptian flanks and rear before disappearing into the safety of the nearby hills. As the Egyptian army approached the city of Kadesh, they were met with a series of cleverly designed ambushes and skirmishes, all aimed at weakening their resolve and disrupting their formations. The Hittites, masters of the hit-and-run tactic, used their lightning-fast chariots to devastating effect, striking at the Egyptian flanks and rear before disappearing into the safety of the nearby hills. On May 12, 1274 BC, the Egyptians encountered a large Hittite force near the city of Shabtuna, where they were engaged in a fierce battle that would last for several hours. The sun beat down on the desert landscape as the Egyptian army marched towards Kadesh, their armor glinting in the bright light. The air was thick with tension as they encountered numerous Hittite scouts and patrols, who reported back to Muwatalli II on the Egyptian army's movements and dispositions. The Hittites, aware of the Egyptian army's approach, had been busy preparing a trap for their enemy, using their knowledge of the terrain to their advantage. The dry riverbeds and rocky outcrops provided perfect cover for Hittite archers and skirmishers, who harassed the Egyptian flanks with constant volleys of arrows and slingstones. The Egyptians, however, were not easily deterred, and they pressed on towards Kadesh, determined to capture the city and assert their dominance over the region. On May 15, 1274 BC, the Egyptians arrived at the city of Kadesh, where they were met with a massive Hittite army, estimated to be around 30,000 troops strong. The Hittites had assembled a vast coalition of allied troops from across Anatolia and Syria, including the Mitanni, the Kaskians, and the Arzawans. The Egyptian army, comprising some 20,000 troops, was vastly outnumbered, but they were determined to fight on, driven by their determination to reclaim Kadesh and assert their dominance over the region. The two armies faced each other across the Orontes River, the water glistening in the sunlight as the soldiers prepared for battle. The Hittite chariots, with their gleaming bronze armor and razor-sharp wheels, formed a formidable line, ready to unleash their fury upon the Egyptian infantry. The Egyptian phalanx, meanwhile, stood firm, their shields locked together like a wall of steel, their spears bristling like a forest of deadly spikes. As the two armies clashed, the Egyptians found themselves facing a formidable foe, with the Hittites using their chariots to devastating effect. The Egyptian infantry, however, held firm, using their shields and spears to deflect the Hittite arrows and chariot attacks. The battle raged on for several hours, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. The sound of clashing steel, the scent of blood and sweat, and the cries of the wounded filled the air as the two armies fought for dominance. One of the most significant events of the Battle of Kadesh was the attack by the Hittite chariots on the Egyptian camp, which was left undefended as the Egyptian army had marched out to engage the Hittites. The Hittite charioteers, led by Muwatalli II's brother Hattusili, launched a surprise attack on the Egyptian camp, catching the Egyptian troops off guard and inflicting heavy casualties. According to an account from the Egyptian records, the enemy came forth from the city of Kadesh, and they fought with us, and we fought with them. The chariots of the enemy were like a whirlwind, and they surrounded us on all sides. This attack caught the Egyptians off guard, and it was only through the bravery and quick thinking of Ramses II that the Egyptian army was able to regroup and launch a counterattack. The Egyptian counterattack was led by Ramses II himself, who rallied his troops and launched a fierce assault on the Hittite lines. The battle raged on for several hours, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. Despite being outnumbered, the Egyptians fought valiantly, using their shields and spears to deflect the Hittite arrows and chariot attacks. As the day wore on, the Hittites began to tire, and the Egyptians sensed an opportunity to gain the upper hand. Ramses II, realizing that the battle was far from over, ordered his troops to press on, determined to capture the city of Kadesh and assert Egyptian dominance over the region. The outcome of the battle, however, was still far from certain, as the Hittites continued to fight fiercely, determined to defend their city and their kingdom. As the day wore on, the Hittites began to tire, their armor dented and battered from the relentless Egyptian onslaught. The Egyptians, sensing an opportunity to gain the upper hand, surged forward with renewed ferocity, their shields locked in a tight phalanx as they pushed against the Hittite lines. Ramses II, his eyes burning with determination, rode at the forefront of the charge, his chariot wheels screeching as he expertly maneuvered through the chaos. The Hittites, however, refused to yield, their own king, Muwatalli II, rallying his troops with a fierce cry, urging them to stand firm against the Egyptian tide. The battle raged on for several more hours, the outcome hanging precariously in the balance as the two armies clashed in a maelstrom of steel and blood. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the battlefield, the air was thick with the smell of sweat, smoke, and death. It was not until the Hittite king, Muwatalli II, was forced to retreat that the Egyptians were able to claim victory. The Hittites had suffered heavy casualties, their army in disarray as they stumbled back towards the safety of their fortified city. Ramses II, however, had also suffered significant losses, his own army exhausted and battered from the prolonged battle. As he surveyed the carnage-strewn battlefield, he knew that the true cost of victory would only become apparent in the days to come. In the end, the Battle of Kadesh was a tactical victory for the Egyptians, but a strategic defeat. Although they had won the battle, they were unable to capture the city of Kadesh or assert their dominance over the region. The Hittites, on the other hand, had successfully defended their kingdom and maintained their control over the region. their reputation as fierce warriors intact. As the dust settled, Ramses II ordered his troops to regroup and tend to their wounded, the Egyptian camp, a scene of frantic activity as medics and priests worked tirelessly to save lives. The Hittites, meanwhile, retreated behind the walls of Kadesh, their king, Muwatalli II, already planning his next move in the ongoing struggle for power in the ancient Near East. The Battle of Kadesh marked a significant turning point in the history of the region, a conflict that would have far-reaching consequences for both Egypt and Hatti. It was one of the largest chariot battles ever fought, with thousands of warriors clashing on the open plain. The battle also highlighted the importance of diplomacy and strategic alliances in the ancient world, as both sides sought to exploit weaknesses and forge advantageous relationships with neighboring kingdoms. As the Egyptian priest, Wenamun, later wrote, "The gods of Egypt and the gods of Hatti have made peace, and the war has ceased." This statement reflects the eventual outcome of the Battle of Kadesh, which was a peace treaty between the Egyptians and the Hittites. The treaty, known as the Eternal Treaty, was signed in 1258 BC and marked the beginning of a long period of peace and cooperation between the two kingdoms. The terms of the treaty were remarkably generous, given the ferocity of the conflict that had preceded it. Both sides agreed to recognize each other's sovereignty, with Egypt acknowledging Hittite control over Kadesh and the surrounding region. In return, the Hittites pledged not to attack Egyptian territories, and both sides agreed to establish trade relationships and exchange diplomatic missions. The battle is celebrated for its vivid descriptions in Egyptian and Hittite records, which provide a unique glimpse into the lives and cultures of ancient civilizations. That's all for today's War Bios. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and until next time, I'm General Biography reminding you to keep marching toward victory.